Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents episode number 37. Today we're going to be talking about CentOS Stream. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to introduce my co-host today. He was a guest on the show just a few weeks ago, and my buddy Brian Smith decided that he deserves some time off. Not sure who approved that, but no matter, because we wanted to bring Nate back on. So Nate, our technical account manager and podcasting extraordinaire, welcome back to Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents.
What a great intro. And you're right. Who let Brian have a day off?
Well, I certainly didn't approve it, but
He's obviously got commitments and, whatever. Thanks for having me back on.
yeah, definitely. Of course, I've been on the Iron Sysadmin, which you are, of course, are one of the hosts of, and we had a great time chatting about Home Labs a few episodes back. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. It was a great conversation. Had a lot of fun. So, of course, you and I have got a growing relationship that. I may end up blaming you for some of the tech expenditures that I have to explain to my wife, but hey.
I mean, are you calling me a bad influence? I don't know. It almost sounds like you are.
Maybe. Well, we'll dig into that in the post show. So it's ironic that we're talking about CentOS Stream and CentOS Stream 9 today, because as of about 9 a.m. Central Time this morning, Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 9 was released. GA, ISOs, repositories, it's all out there. It's all ready to go. So RHEL 9 is live. And I don't know about anybody else out there, but this morning when I saw the official announcement go out, I literally just went, because I've done nothing but breathe RHEL 8.6 and 9.0 and Summit for the last few weeks. But yeah, Red Hat Summit was last week. It was awesome. It was an amazing experience. I got to meet a bunch of folks. And of course, you've already been called out for wearing a RHEL 8 shirt on RHEL 9 launch day.
Yeah. I was actually going to comment that in honor of the RHEL 9 launch, I wore my RHEL 8 launch shirt, but someone already hit it in the chat, so you guys are sharp.
Right, they're on it. But I mean, to that point, RHEL 8 launched 3 years ago, and part of that was we mentioned a predictable release cadence: 6-month minor releases, 3-year major releases. So I'm sure someone at Red Hat did the math, but I think 3 years to the week that we launched RHEL 8, and now we've got RHEL 9 out. And 3 years from now, I may very well be sitting right in this spot again, and we'll be talking about RHEL 10. So it's really exciting to see, and a huge piece of that definitely comes from this move to CentOS Stream and to CentOS Stream 9. So we've although I should mention before I introduce our guest that coming up on June 1st is episode actually I forgot what episode it'll be. I think it's episode 39 of Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. This show will be live. Brian will be back from vacation by then, and we're going to have a couple of my colleagues and coworkers on RHEL Presents to talk about RHEL 9 and the release. So definitely join us for that in a couple of weeks. But before I derailed myself there, something that we're excited to talk about is how much RHEL 9, how smooth of a transition it was, how awesome the features are, and that is due in very large part to this move to using CentOS Stream as the immediate upstream for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So we talked about it, and we decided that what better way to celebrate the launch of RHEL 9 than to talk about where it came from. And to do that, we wanted to bring in a CentOS community expert, and his name is Shaun McCance. And so welcome to Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents, Shaun.
Hello. Hey, thanks for having me.
Definitely. We're excited to have you on the show. CentOS has been a huge part of my career. And so really excited to talk about CentOS, talk about Stream, talk about what it's like to work for Red Hat and work on CentOS. So I'm excited to dive into some of that with you.
Yeah, cool.
So why don't we start with what brought you to where you are, and then we'll talk about what exactly you do here to pull from office
Sure.
space.
Yeah, so I work in the Red Hat Open Source Program Office, which is a department within Red Hat that is entirely responsible for taking care of our upstreams, our community projects. So we're not directly involved with the product space. We work on the upstream projects. I've been with Red Hat for almost 8 years now, although I'm fairly new to the CentOS role. My predecessor, Rich, we swapped some work stuff around towards the beginning of this year. So yeah, I'm excited to be working with this project.
Awesome. So you mentioned something that our audience may or may not be familiar with, and this is a growing department within not only Red Hat but in a lot of major organizations, and that's the Open Source Program Office. What in the world is the OSPO?
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned, it's a growing thing in a lot of companies across the tech industry. And it's interesting if you look at what OSPOs do in a lot of companies. Red Hat's OSPO is different in a lot of ways than what you see in a lot of other companies, because everything Red Hat does is open source. So in a lot of companies, you see, they're doing some proprietary stuff or some open core. Like open source is a piece of their puzzle, but it's not everything they do. And so their OSPO will literally just do anything that has to do with the open source. They handle it. Whereas at Red Hat, like, all of our engineers and other people, working on our products are already working upstream, working in these communities. So there's a lot of stuff we don't do in Red Hat's Open Source Program Office that you might see in other companies, just because that expertise is already kind of baked into the DNA of Red Hatters. But there's still a lot to do for the projects, marketing, taking care of the people, making sure that community voices from outside of Red Hat are heard within Red Hat, and that Red Hat's message is communicated well to the community. Representing the projects at conferences and events, or even just doing the planning around having some of these events. So there's a whole lot of stuff that happens inside the Open Source Program Office, and we have people like me that are kind of embedded into a particular project. Then we have other people that kind of work across projects, doing documentation, editorial work, artwork, infrastructure. And then we have some other people who are kind of embedded in vertical spaces, doing stuff like financial services or automotive.
So I was going to interject and ask if you ever pronounce OSPO as OSPO, and then you said it about a dozen times. So I guess so.
I do. Yeah, I do all the time. And it's when I was hired on, it was before OSPOs were super common in the industry. And the name of the department was actually the Open Source and Standards, which we called OSAS. And a few years ago, after OSPOs kind of took off across the industry, we decided it was just worthwhile to just, follow that brand. So yeah, definitely. Everyone says OSPO.
OSPO sounds a lot better than, what was that, OSAS?
OSAS. Yeah.
It just rolls off so
yeah.
much better.
Mhm.
So I spent probably a decade or so as a systems administrator. Nate, I know you were a sysadmin back before you came to Red Hat, and so I know that for myself, just like a lot of folks out there, we worked on a mix of CentOS, of RHEL, and Windows, and I've been told there's other distributions out there other than Fedora, even though I've been all about Fedora 36 for the last week. So shout out to the Fedora team, by the way. We're all one big happy family here at Red Hat. But I also know that I wouldn't have been successful as a systems administrator if it weren't for my home lab. And at the time, the developer subscription wasn't as prevalent for RHEL and Red Hat as it is today. So a lot of my learning, a lot of my home operations, that kind of thing, are are just built on CentOS and around the project, around the community. every now and then I see someone with a CentOS logo on their shirt, and it takes me back to those days of being a sysadmin and trying to figure out, how do I do this thing? Well, I can't figure it out here at work, so I'm going to go home, spin up a similar system in my home lab, and give it a try. But maybe so I think Nate and I could very easily talk about CentOS from a technical and project perspective, but why don't you shed some light on what the CentOS community looks like, and who are some of the players involved, and what does that organization look like from a community perspective?
Sure. You know, the majority of the work to package stuff happens by red hatters, but it is happening in the open, which was the whole idea of CentOS Stream, is that this work that used to happen behind closed doors, we're now doing it in the open, and anybody else, people from outside Red Hat, can contribute. They can send merge requests, to update certain packages or add certain packages based on what their needs are. But most of the packaging work, still happens within Red Hat, which makes sense. But then we have a whole set of communities around our special interest group, or special interest groups, or SIGs, which I think is maybe one of the more interesting parts of it. So we have SIGs that are producing packages that you don't find in CentOS, and you don't find in RHEL or anything derived from RHEL. And RHEL has its packages that are the packages that Red Hat, of course, is committed to supporting over the lifespan of a RHEL release, which is a much smaller set of packages than what you would find in, say, Fedora, which just has everything that somebody's willing to package. And so we have the SIGs that are producing packages around cloud infrastructure or storage, hyperscale. There's the kernel mod SIG that was is doing kernel mods for file systems, for example, that we don't support within RHEL. And then there are SIGs that are doing extra work around CentOS, so doing work like artwork and promotion, documentation, stuff like that. So I think those are kind of maybe the more. Well, I don't want to say that packaging isn't interesting. If you get really excited about packaging and you really need these packages in CentOS itself, then absolutely come do the work there. But there's a lot of packaging work that happens in the SIGs, and there's a lot of other work around promoting the project that happens within the SIGs as well.
Yeah, the special interest groups are kind of the not so secret sauce around things like Fedora and CentOS. I mean, like you said, there's a SIG for about everything from IoT to automotive to hyperscale to everything else. And I mean, nowadays, especially since RHEL 8, the SIGs are really where different industries can go to start to develop an idea that eventually they'd like to have land on RHEL. It's nice because CentOS Stream moves quicker than RHEL. Fedora moves even faster than that. But having CentOS Stream sitting right there in the middle gives a RHEL-like experience to like telecommunications, or we talked at Red Hat Summit with Intel. And we're doing a lot of work with Intel on AI, on ML, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. We're hitting all the acronyms today. But being able to experiment in the open and work on an idea and really develop it, so that in the next major release of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you've got all of that stuff built in. It provides, I don't want to say a playground, because that doesn't sound productive, but it provides a space in the open to flesh out an idea. And having those special interest groups allow like-minded individuals to go and work on the thing and see it through from idea into actual production code that eventually works its way into Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So I mean, when we say it's the not so secret sauce, I mean, it's out there. So if you have an interest like cloud, like IoT, get involved in a SIG, especially around CentOS, because there's a growing community of developers that are out there working on this code right out there in the open. You can go to the CentOS repository on GitLab and download the source code. You can push pull requests back to have code changes. I mean, it's really an elegant and amazing system.
So I feel like we've thrown a whole bunch of terms around here. I'm sorry, we're talking over each other.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like we're throwing a lot of terms around here that maybe some people maybe don't already have an understanding for. So let's take a very brief step back. What is CentOS? What's the right way to pronounce it? And what is Stream?
The right way to pronounce it is however you pronounce it. It's
answer.
funny.
That's
I actually, I've been a GNOME contributor for 20 years, which of course has its own, like, is it GNOME or GNOME? So I only get involved with projects with ambiguous pronunciation.
Good call.
That sounds like a great career goal. I like
it's
that.
easy to do in this industry.
CentOS, CentOS, any of them are fine, really, as long as you use it and love it. So what were the other questions? I just hit the pronunciation. What is it?
Sorry. What is
We hit the
CentOS?
important one.
And what is Stream is really the important
Sure.
questions here.
CentOS as a project is kind of opening up the process around RHEL, and CentOS Stream is the specific project within CentOS, the project that becomes RHEL. So, you know, Fedora is the far upstream of RHEL, right? The RHEL 9 branched off of Fedora. I don't know. Do you know?
Is it
30 something, surely.
34?
I think it was something like
Okay.
32.
So at some point here, you know, they're going to take a version of Fedora that exists or will exist soon, 36, 37, and they will branch that off, and that will become RHEL 10. But you don't just take Fedora and rip out a few packages, well, a whole lot of packages actually, and call that RHEL. There's a whole process that goes into hardening and testing and building things in an enterprise environment. And that whole process happens now within the CentOS Stream project. So your base set of packages come from a Fedora release, but there's a whole lot of work that goes into turning Fedora into RHEL. And so Red Hat has shifted to doing all of that work in the open. We started the shift to that in the with CentOS Stream 8, which was the first CentOS Stream release. And that, I see everybody is confirming that it's 34, by the
34.
way. So,
That's why I do live streams, because I can be wrong, and I can be certain that like a dozen people will correct me within moments. So it's great.
All the people on the show that we're supposed to know got it wrong. Thank you, audience.
Okay.
I thought 34, but I hedged.
Yeah. So
Anyway, go ahead.
yes. So CentOS Stream, of course, was used for building the RHEL 8 minor releases. But kind of, you know, the RHEL 8 development process was already in progress when we introduced CentOS Stream for that. And so CentOS Stream was used to develop the point releases, but it was kind of built in after the fact. With CentOS Stream 9 and with RHEL 9, it's the first release of RHEL that's really, like, from the ground up, built from this new process of doing all of our RHEL development from the beginning in CentOS Stream in the open.
So I guess you kind of already touched on this. So the workflow is Fedora gets forked, work is done, lots of work to sort of enterprise ready it. That, I suppose, then goes into Stream, right? And then
Yep.
Stream is what feeds RHEL.
Right.
Just to sort of summarize all of that. Cool.
Right.
And you
that
can
explains it.
get a good look at the momentum by looking at how long each version is supported. Like Fedora, I believe, has support for each version for 2 years. CentOS Stream has 5 years, and then you get to RHEL, and you've got a 10-year life cycle. So you can kind of get an idea for the level of support and the momentum at which these projects move. I mean, can you imagine trying to support a Fedora version for 10 years? It moves too quick, covers way too many technologies and use cases, and CentOS Stream much the same. So you've got Fedora with 2 years, CentOS Stream with 5, and then RHEL with 10, which in 3 years we'll have 3 major versions out, which will be interesting. And I may have no hair left, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We just launched RHEL 9, so we've got 2 major versions in full support, and then we've got RHEL 7 for a couple more years. So anyway, I won't go down the tangent of life cycles and marketing releases and that kind of thing. But so with CentOS Stream, when can we just kind of wrap up the life cycle story? About when can we expect CentOS Stream 10? Because I think I saw that question run through in the chat.
I think I get in trouble if I make any promises on that.
Fair enough.
I don't know, actually, is the answer. I don't know which version of Fedora they'll base it on. But basically, as soon as the RHEL team decides that that's their version of Fedora, and they begin that work, they set that as their baseline and start doing the development towards RHEL. It will be done in the open as in CentOS Stream, but I don't know the date.
Well, yeah, I mean that's fair. I mean, with this move to Stream, CentOS Stream 8 came out, and then it seems like just a couple of months later, Stream 9 was out. So we're still trying to figure out how that timeline looks. I just wasn't sure if maybe if there was anything different.
I would say it's probably fair to judge it on the published release cycle that we're trying to stick to, right? Every 3 years, there should be a new version of RHEL. So if history tells us anything, roughly 8 months ago, I think, is when there was talk of Stream 9. Maybe it was less, more like 6 months ago. So, extrapolate out. There's no promise there, but,
And the whole live streaming thing works out again because Mr. Carl George, who joined us not too long ago for a show on Apple, is in the chat, and he suggests that CentOS Stream 10 will probably be around 2024, and that likely will be based on Fedora 40. So thank you, Carl, for hanging out with us in the chat. We'll send you that check, or maybe Bitcoin later.
Well, Carl was out mathing me. I've got a bunch of math books behind me. And,
yeah, but when you're in the live stream, all of the logic and reason from your brain seems to melt.
Right.
Yep.
That's how it works.
That's why I said Fedora 32 instead of 34. My brain is somewhere else, and trying to get 8.6, 9.0. We're already talking about 9.1 and 8.7. So yeah, numbers, math, it's great fun. So if you're in our chat room, definitely throw your questions out there. There are no stupid questions. There's just stupid hosts that fail to answer said questions. And definitely join our Matrix room. So we kind of, I think we beat the life cycle horse to death. So one of the things that we've talked about at kind of that we've kind of fenced with is this idea that you can contribute to CentOS, that you can see the development process out in public. So how can people get involved? I mentioned that there's GitLab repository, but how would you recommend diving in? Because I'm sure most of our audience doesn't want to immediately dive into deep kernel module development, but
they don't. Is that? Oh.
I mean, you might
start. That's what people do on the weekends.
You might start recompiling a new cryptography library first before you get into kernel modules. But how would you recommend folks start getting involved with the community and then with development specifically? Because as we'll talk about here in a minute, the community is not just developers. But how would you recommend getting started?
So we do have, if you just go to CentOS.org, which I'll do to verify that I don't say incorrect things, there is underneath in the header bar, the community link there has a link to a contribute page, which lists some of the ways you can get involved. But also under documentation, there is manuals, which is not a great term, but what's in there is the contributors guide, and the contributors guide is focused on how you would do packaging if you want to get involved with that, whereas the contribute wiki page has a lot of information on other ways you might get involved, working on the wiki itself or doing artwork and localization. Contributing to EPEL is a really good one. I like to talk up EPEL, even though it's technically under the Fedora project and not under the CentOS project, and yet it's producing packages that people are, largely consuming under CentOS. So it's I don't know, a dotted line close sister project, I suppose. So I would still consider that if you are contributing to EPEL, then I consider you to be contributing to the CentOS ecosystem, and I'm happy to welcome you in. So yeah, there's a lot of things on the wiki page of different ways you can get involved, and that manual under the documentation has a lot of information on how you can get involved in the actual nitty-gritty kind of packaging work.
And I did want to up-level a question here that's going on in the chat, and that's is there maybe I can check this real quick, but is there not a boot installer for like a netboot installer for CentOS Stream?
Yeah, for clarification here, right? So previous releases had a base release plus the full release, right? So the full release was like an 8 gig or whatever ISO, and the base was much smaller, but it had just like the minimal install. Is that still the case? It looks like on CentOS.org there's not a base release anymore, not a minimal install anymore. Is that something that's gone, or is that just not currently available?
I don't know the answer to
That's fair.
Carl will give the answer in chat, I'm sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we'll look into that. It didn't see it. Actually, the cloud ISO might actually be a bit smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just it. Maybe it's just been renamed.
Yeah, I'm looking at the page right now, and
this is the upside to having a whole bunch of folks hanging out at the same time. We can sometimes troubleshoot things right on the air.
There you go.
So we've got the CentOS contributor page, and we've got obviously operating system development is what people think about most when they think about contributing to something like a distribution. What other areas can folks get involved and contribute to something like the CentOS project?
I'm a big fan of documentation contributions. It's kind of that's my background, how I came into doing open source work. We do have an effort underway. The documentation team inside of Red Hat that does the RHEL documentation is working on upstreaming all of the RHEL documentation into CentOS. So there will be a massive amount of documentation. Hopefully, it's not going to come out all at once. It's a whole process, and we're kind of prioritizing which documents are most important to get out there earliest. But that's work that's underway. Now, the work on writing those things is being done by the content services team inside Red Hat, but there's a whole lot of work that can happen around that. Just reading the documentation can be a way to contribute, because you find issues, things that could be improved, and give feedback on that. So certainly giving feedback on this new documentation that's coming out would be very useful. There's also documentation that could be written that wouldn't fall into what we produce for RHEL. So for example, that the contributors guide that I referenced earlier, it has a lot of information in it, but it could definitely use a lot of updates, and could use more eyeballs on it to work on it. So that's a kind of document that, the RHEL documentation is going to be about how to use RHEL, and then as we upstream it, how to use CentOS in various environments. It's not so much about how to contribute to it. So contributor documentation is somewhere where people could directly give contributions and write stuff. Other places where people could contribute, doing artwork and design work. We're working on a new logo. I know people love the old logo, and it's classic and nostalgic, but it's very busy, and it's hard to print, and especially hard to embroider. It's actually really hard for Swag, the existing logo. So we have some work going on simplifying the CentOS logo, and with that there'll be a whole lot of work to do. Web design work around refreshing our various web properties, I suppose, making them fit a new design. There's a lot of work that could be done in the kind of the content strategy around our website, our wiki, and the website, and various other things. Like, there's a whole lot of information in a whole lot of places, and people who are good at content strategy can put that together in a way that maybe makes a lot more sense. So that would be extremely valuable work. Gosh, I don't know what else. There's so many ways you can contribute that doesn't involve doing packaging work.
Well, that's probably, I mean, is in all my years as an open source advocate, that's probably the one thing that strikes me the most, is how widespread that misconception is that, oh, I'm not a developer, I'm not a code writer, so I can't contribute to open source. I mean, if you look at, Nate and I were talking about the Iron Sysadmin podcast, and I've helped start a few community podcasts in my time as well, it's amazing because an open source project, to some extent or another, needs everything that a commercial product does. You need project management. You need marketing. In open source, we don't call it marketing. We call it just sharing this thing that I wrote. But in all manner, it's still marketing, and it just takes on a different form. But you still need, in some cases, you need sponsorship or some kind of promotion. You need some kind of presence in the community, whether that's events or on community podcasts like the Iron Sysadmin or others. And I mean, even just down to, we need someone to make said logo. We need someone to edit video. We need someone who can write coherent blog posts. We need someone who can read and edit documentation. Translations is huge. And so CentOS, I mean, is a full-blown community project. CentOS Stream is a full-blown distribution. So it's community driven. So if you want to contribute to CentOS, if you want to be a part of Stream, look no further than the contribution page, because there's always something to do. There's always more to be done.
Yeah, and you mentioned promotion. That's something I probably should talk about more. It's there is an actual promotion SIG, and I am nominally the chair of it as the community manager. It kind of came with the position, but we could certainly actually use people. I'm the chair and kind of the sole member, I think, at this point. So could use help a lot with promotion, and especially as we begin to return to doing in-person events. Having people staffing booths or giving presentations or just handing out swag at events is very valuable. I can't be at every event all the time. I look at programs like the Fedora Ambassador program, which I would like to emulate that success. They've done a really good job of creating these ambassadors for Fedora that are just community members who are out there promoting and supporting Fedora. And so if we could do something similar for CentOS, that would be really great. So yeah, contributions around promotions would be huge for me.
So if you're out there and if you like doing marketing work, if you like doing promotion work, please come help Shaun out. We like Shaun. We want to keep him. So Nate, I feel like I've done a lot of the talking. What's on your mind?
So, well, to be honest, I don't know. We've covered things pretty well here. I guess I am kind of curious. We talked a bit about lifecycle and sort of how Fedora becomes CentOS, becomes RHEL. And that kind of tickled my brain. Like, if somebody got involved at the CentOS level, not at the Fedora level, like, I'm a software developer. I want to see a change in RHEL. Can I just go and try to get that committed into CentOS, or does it have to go further upstream to Fedora first?
I suppose that depends on what kind of change you want. So if you're looking to change the init system, this is something that happened some years ago, right? That's something that needs to happen in Fedora first, right? We're not going to create a CentOS version that uses a different init system than what Fedora had and never give it any testing out there in Fedora land. If you're looking to, maybe you're on RHEL 9 or CentOS Stream 9, and you want maybe an upstream of Python or HTTPD or something, maybe has some feature, and it's not a huge breaking change like going Python 2 to Python 3, but a change that would introduce some new features, but is still fairly safe. That would be something that we could do within a CentOS release cycle. No guarantee, of course. It is
Sure.
always up to the RHEL maintainers on what they want to actually support for that 10-year lifespan of RHEL. So it just depends on the magnitude of the change.
Right. So I can't just get my my code pushed and done. It's in RHEL. No, it doesn't work that way. Not quite that simple.
Right.
There's still an approval process, obviously.
Yes. It is not a free-for-all.
Right. So this, I don't know, this could be, I don't want to touch on touchy subjects, but who exactly is CentOS for? Who's the target audience? Who should be running it? Where should they be running it? That sort of thing. Is there like a supported, I guess it's supported is a tricky word all by itself, but who's the target audience other than folks who who want to see RHEL before it's RHEL?
Sure. Yeah, so first of all, I avoid the word support.
Yes. I quickly backed that up.
You're Tam. Come on, man.
Yeah. Support is something that Red Hat offers for RHEL, right? And it is a paid relationship that means something. So, well, it's you might get different answers if you ask different people. So I would say I think we would all agree that it's for people who want to maybe see RHEL before RHEL's out, test against RHEL before RHEL is out. If you're developing applications that you expect to be running in a RHEL environment, definitely being able to test those out before the next version of RHEL comes out. We already saw this. A lot of the work in our SIGs, some of our SIGs are directly fueling some of the other products that Red Hat makes. The Cloud SIG is doing work that helps out our Red Hat OpenStack deployment, for example. Mm-hmm. And so they are able, in the open, even non-Red Hatters contributing to these kinds of things, were able to develop and test against what would be RHEL 9 before RHEL 9 existed. So that's, I think, the obvious use case is previewing and testing, developing for RHEL. There are certainly a lot of other people using CentOS Stream for other use cases. I want to be careful. Like, I don't want to make the TAM mad by telling big businesses to go run CentOS in massive production environments. But I run it. I've got a couple of servers with Linode am I allowed to do a product name drop?
Sure, go for it. Well, it's too late. It's already out there now anyway. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a couple of servers with Linode, and those are, they're running. I'm an open source developer. I've got projects that I do aside from like what Red Hat pays me to do. And so, I'm hosting some websites and some CI and stuff. And it's my personal projects. I'm using CentOS on those servers. It works extremely well, and I'm comfortable doing that. I think CentOS can be run in a lot of environments where you need some sort of server type load. Home media servers or anything like that would be an obvious place. I think is perfectly fine. So I don't know. I'm trying to walk a fine line of not trying to. Yeah.
Things like my home lab. That's a great place to run CentOS. Which, by the way, does I run some RHEL in my home lab, but I also run some CentOS Stream 9 or Stream 8 in my home lab. I also run a couple personal sites, and as we've mentioned already, I run a podcast. That stuff's all on top of a host in the cloud on CentOS Stream 8 in Podman containers, right? So personally, I feel like that's a fine use for it. The podcast can't afford and doesn't need a RHEL subscription or support because it's run by me, right? So those seem like good use cases.
What about, especially for that home lab use case, it makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking about moving my Plex server over to Stream. I, I feel like RHEL is a good base for it, but at the same time, you get updates of transcoding, you get better, you get newer drivers quicker with something like Fedora. But I don't want to have to reboot my family's Plex server every so often when a new kernel release comes out. So I kind of feel like CentOS Stream running Plex and Podman would be kind of like the perfect the perfect
Right in the middle. Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of Goldilocks when it comes to home labs.
What about
Also, we do have we talk about server stuff, which is surely the bulk of people's usage of CentOS and probably the bulk of RHEL usage. I'm not a RHEL salesperson. I don't know. But all the workstation stuff is there as well, just like it's in RHEL. And so you could run CentOS on your graphical desktop, your workstation, if you don't want to, have the every 6 months flashy new stuff that you would get with Fedora. There are people who want a more stable workstation environment, so it's perfectly usable for that too.
That was exactly where I was heading next. What about a desktop or a laptop, right?
Yeah.
It's certainly usable, right? But it's not going to be as cutting edge as, say, Fedora, right? I ran CentOS for a very short amount of time as my workstation as a sysadmin. Pretty quickly found that, as a desktop OS, it's certainly functional, especially if your goal is to mimic your server environments. But it doesn't have the creature comforts that something like Fedora might. Although that could have changed by now. We're talking, my God, it was like 9 years ago. I tried that. It was like CentOS 6, 7, something like that.
I think one of the nice things, and maybe I'm getting into promoting other projects that I care about, but one of the nice things with the latest desktop development is with the move to being able to package applications with like Flatpak and putting them on FlatHub, or even Fedora's Flatpak channel or whatever. You can actually get some things. You can get a lot of apps and a lot of updates to apps that you wouldn't have been able to get in the past if you were just relying on, just the repositories of what Red Hat is going to package for an enterprise workstation.
So I promised one of our longtime listeners that we'd circle back to this question, and it kind of has to do with picking platforms and that kind of thing. It had to do with, and I have an answer for this, but I also want to get your thoughts as well. Except there it is. It just scrolled by. So we were asked earlier in the show, and I apologize, I missed this. What can Red Hat and as a consequence IBM do to ensure third-party software vendors, especially talking along the desktop, things like VirtualBox, Slack, etc., can support RHEL 9 prior to release? And I kind of feel like we're talking about that right here, talking about we've mentioned Apple today. We've mentioned developing for CentOS Stream. That way, it's ready to go day one for RHEL. In this case, RHEL 9. And I think I've got an answer for this, but then I also want to get yours, and Nate can jump in on this as well. So. Be thinking of your all's responses here, because this one kind of came out of left field, and I promised that wouldn't happen, Shaun. So
Sure.
just blame the chat. But I mean, my thought is we've done that when we launched RHEL 8, when we launched when CentOS launched Stream, with things like Flatpaks, things like Apple. I feel like we're moving everything towards this weird, awkward development process from Fedora to RHEL and then downstream to CentOS. Now we've moved CentOS into public view. So now it's Fedora's Stream, RHEL, and we're getting more support. Folks like yourself, folks like Matthew Miller, folks like Carl George, who we've talked to on the show. We're getting better support for development. Things are in the open. Things are being able to move at different paces. We've got things like app streams within Red Hat Enterprise Linux that you can choose which version you want to be on of certain applications, certain workloads within RHEL. So I feel like Red Hat, IBM, the upstream community, I think we're already there to where things like bug fixes, performance enhancements, newer versions of software are already going to be out there. I feel like today was a huge step forward with the release of RHEL 9 and being able to get software, whether it's desktop or server workloads. I feel like we're there now, and I think over the next 3 years in particular, we're really going to see the benefits of some of the lifecycle changes that RHEL made, some of the project changes that CentOS made with Stream. Does that feel right to you? Does that ring true?
Yeah, definitely. I think CentOS Stream is a big part of what Red Hat is doing to ensure that third-party vendors can get their stuff tested and working on RHEL, on things in the enterprise Linux ecosystem. Because we've had this whole time, Red Hat RHEL 9 just released, but CentOS Stream 9 has been out there in the public for months, and that's all of that time that vendors, no judgment on like what their development process. I know everybody's got their own schedules and calendars, and I've worked, elsewhere in the software industry, but all of that time is time that if they want to be ahead of the curve, they could be testing, developing against Stream 9, so that when RHEL 9.0 drops, they're ready right away. So I think Stream is a big part of how we're making sure people can get their stuff tested for future RHEL versions. And I also think the move towards containerization, and of course containers are Linux, means that, right, everything, you're able to kind of reduce your testing matrix, I suppose, because you bundle together the things that you need. And so, for a server deployment, using Podman or other stuff, and in a workstation environment, looking at things like Flatpak, so that you're not so dependent on little tiny individual changes in the underlying operating system. I think that goes a long way towards helping third-party vendors. If they're still having issues, if there's other things that we can do, if those are things that we can do in CentOS land and in community land first, then I certainly, I'm happy to talk to people. Just reach out and tell us your problems, and see what we can do.
Ooh, careful. That
Yeah.
opens the floodgates, because I've got a bunch of problems. I
Right.
mean, none of them related to Stream, but I was trying to find it. I think there's one other question in our chat that I wanted to up level. So if you have a question and you're hanging out in the chat with us today, very active. I love to see that. If I feel like I missed somebody's question, so if you have a question that you want to ask either Nate or Shaun or myself, feel free to post those. I mean, great conversations today. Lots of distro war conversations going on, but
Yeah, a lot of conversation about how CentOS split out when Stream was announced, and that's, to me, that's the power of open source software, right? If you don't like a direction, you can take a direction on your own, right? Just like, what was it when systemd came out? Was it, I forget, what, Debian, right? Didn't Debian fork at that point because somebody just
I think
had
so.
to keep the old init system? They didn't want systemd. That's the power of open source, right? So
Gosh, it's someone. I still had someone come up and mention systemd.
I still get it from time to time. Systemd is terrible. Whatever. It's the future. There's a lot of power in systemd.
Well, and that's exactly the point, because
Dev one, there it is.
with thanks, Carl. We're going to have to hire Carl onto the RHEL Presents
Just to
production
moderate chat.
team. If there was such a thing, I'd hire him a heartbeat. Carl's amazing people, so thank you for hanging out with us today, Carl. But I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why CentOS developed the idea of Stream, was just the existing development model is just too slow. The industry's changed. Everything's going modular. The industry's going modular. I mean, we can get so much out of an operating system, or we can get so much out of hardware now, that there's so much more you can do with an operating system. it's really gosh, I try and watch the chat as I'm talking. Thanks, Mark. I
Yeah.
love that. But wow, this is why I can't have chat open and make a point at the same time. But I mean, that was the whole reason behind Stream is there's this move in the industry to let's get more out of our hardware, let's get more out of our operating system, and we've got all of these different platforms, we got all these different use cases. I mean, IoT, automotive, and then like high performance computing. All of those things require different things. You need to tune the kernel differently because we can squeeze every last little bit out of your operating system and out of your hardware now that things have to be modular. And I really wish I had operating systems like this. And we're seeing more and more from things like RPM OS tree, where you can actually just deploy an immutable operating system out to a little teeny tiny pizza box sized server out in the middle of a telephone tower, out in the middle of nowhere, that you want to make sure that it's got all the packages downloaded. You don't want any changes to be done. I mean, we're looking at systems administration now, where it's common practice to not log into production at all. No SSH whatsoever. The only system the only account that has any login rights is the Ansible service account that you create with the SSH key, so you can push changes, things like Podman, things like RPM OS tree. So the industry is changing. The days of taking care of our server infrastructure or even of our users' desktops as if they're pets, where we give them names and we nurse them back to health when their disks fill up. Nowadays, the approach is you just blow it up and deploy a brand new
Build a
one
new
with
one.
more resources, and you don't log into it. You don't touch anything. You use something like Image Builder to get your golden template. You push that out to AWS, GCP, VMware, and your developers' laptops. So everyone's working from the same image. You deploy that using Image Builder. You get something like Ansible to deploy system roles so that your firewall, your SSH configuration, all those things are exactly identical across your entire fleet. And then on top of that, you deploy your workloads as Podman containers. I mean, that's where that is the direction that's the direction that the industry is heading, and moving CentOS Stream ahead of RHEL makes so much sense because now CentOS Stream moves even quicker than RHEL does, but it still ends up as part of RHEL. So you get this beautiful balance, even in Red Hat Enterprise Linux. You get this beautiful balance between innovation and momentum, but you still get the same security, the same life cycle that you've expected for 10 years with a RHEL major release. So I think that was the end of my answer.
So
Nate,
look, I
you
mean,
wanna weigh in on that?
my opinion here, right? So the older model of very tightly controlled versioned operating systems, like the model of CentOS before Stream, right, worked for a long time. There were problems with that. Some of those were security related. Some of those were just sort of nimble and agility related problems, right? Stream and containers really helps kind of solve that.
Mm-hmm.
Huge security exploit comes out. We have to patch quickly. We have to get updates pushed out quickly, whatever. And then it's harder to do that in the old model than it is on the newer model. And having a distribution that moves faster and having a container platform to make that a lot more agile, I think is kind of the future, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think we can tell that may be sort of the future that's envisioned by a lot of folks in the industry.
And actually, that
So
was the question I was trying to find a minute ago. I knew I'd missed one. It was about security fixes into something like Stream, and with RHEL and Stream being much more tightly coupled now, I think that's one of the advantages we're going to see, especially over the next 3 years. Is we're able to much more quickly get fixes either in RHEL and push them upstream, or someone might submit a fix in Stream that we can then even more quickly get pushed back downstream to RHEL. So having this more tightly coupled relationship is really going to help not only with innovation but also with the ability to get security certifications security fixes pushed to either upstream or downstream, depending on where the fix is actually tested. And that code's is much more connected and much more and is much more tightly integrated. So you're going to see, I think, a much better response to security issues over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I know what. There's a question about that in the chat, and I was going to mention that anyway. Since you brought up security fixes, security fixes, embargoed security fixes go through a different process than the other updates that we put through CentOS Stream and RHEL. So if there are feature updates or just general bug fixes, those happen in CentOS Stream first, and then from there they make their way into RHEL. But when there are security issues that have a CVE and Red Hat gets notified about them, we have a different internal process to make sure that we can get those, get the updates for those into RHEL and onto our customers' RHEL boxes, hopefully before they're public. And so that's a different process. And then after we get that through RHEL, the security fixes then go to CentOS Stream. So it's a little bit, I guess the stream is a little bit backwards for security fixes, but that's part of the value of RHEL. And I know there has been in Stream 8 a delay sometimes in the security fixes, and people have been asking for those to get pushed up to CentOS Stream faster. I'm not in RHEL engineering. I don't know all of the specifics of everything, but I do know that part of it is kind of what I mentioned earlier, that the Stream 8 process was kind of bolted onto the RHEL 8 process after the fact, whereas the Stream 9 process was built from the ground up to work the way it's supposed to. And so hopefully what we'll be seeing here as we move forward with Stream 9 and with RHEL 9 is these fixes making it into CentOS Stream a bit faster. Of course, they'll be in RHEL first, but getting them into CentOS Stream 9 faster would be nice.
Man, there is
confirms that I didn't just lie, so that's good.
I mean, I hate that I'm about to say this, but because there is an amazing conversation going on in chat. I mean, this has been a great conversation. Eric only got on the soapbox once this episode, so we're doing good there. But we are coming to the top of the hour. So I wanted to ask if there were any upcoming events, live or other, I should say in person or virtual or otherwise, that you'd like to mention.
Yeah, goodness, thank you. I almost went a whole hour without saying that. I wanted to plug that. So we will be having a CentOS Dojo next month, a virtual online one. Dojos are free mini conferences CentOS has been holding for a very long time. I don't know why they're called dojos, but they are. So we'll be having an online one on Friday, June 17th. If you just go to wiki.centos.org/events, there's a link there for that. Free registration. We use Hopin as the platform. The call for presentations is open. If you want to submit and talk about something, we're definitely interested in hearing what people are doing with CentOS. And otherwise, you can just register and tune in and watch. We are also working on an in-person dojo. We haven't had an in-person dojo since FOSDEM 2020, I think, was the last time. So hopefully we can get back to doing in person. So we're working on doing an in-person dojo co-located with DevConf US in Boston in August. We don't have it confirmed yet, so please don't book your travel. But you can book your travel to DevConf and just attend to that anyway. But we are working on doing a CentOS Dojo the day before DevConf, and hopefully that'll work out.
That's awesome. And then there was one other question a bit earlier in the stream. You mentioned a brand refresh. Do you have just like a ballpark time frame for that? Are we talking 6 months, 8 years?
Less than 8 years. The logo work is actually the logo itself is done. It's just going to take some work in actually getting it pushed through all the various channels, doing all of the updates on things. I very strongly want it to go through before the in-person dojo in August, so that I can print brand new swag with the new logo and take it and give it to people in Boston. So that's my goal, is to have it done before August.
Gotcha. That is much less than 8 years. So that's good.
Yes. It's less than 6 months even. So
Good job not overcommitting,
though. So any closing thoughts you want to share with us before we wrap for the day?
No, just thank you for having me. It's been really good talking to you guys and reaching out to this audience.
Yeah, anytime. You're always welcome on RHEL Presents. We've actually done kind of a spring of upstream. I should have put some more marketing thought into that, because we could have made that a thing. But I mean, we've talked to Apple, we've talked to Fedora, we've talked to CentOS. So I'm a huge fanboy of CentOS and Fedora. So definitely glad to chat with you and bring you on the show anytime. Nate, any closing thoughts? Anywhere people should go to find you?
I just think it's really refreshing that I'm not the one that has to hunt around for the closing screen and the outro music right now. No, thanks again. Thanks for having me on. Eric has mentioned my podcast several times. Check out the Iron Sysadmin podcast if you want to hear Mark Richter sing. Otherwise, thanks. Hope you guys enjoyed the show.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for filling in, and especially on short notice. I think I was out at Summit and was like, Brian just put in vacation next week. I need help.
I need a co-host. Help. No, anytime, man. This is fun.
Yeah, well, I think Brian's got a few other conflicts coming up over the next few months. So if you want to see more of Nate, go check out the Iron Sysadmin podcast. I talk for a living. Can you tell? But we'll also have him back on this show a few times. I know you're going to be a guest of ours for a Podman Home Labs episode, kind of a follow-up to our Home Lab episode. And also, definitely don't forget, coming up June 1st on RHEL Presents, Brian will be back with me. We'll be talking about Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9.0. Also, Scott McBrien, former host of the show, and Matthew Yee, one of our recurring guests, will be here to talk about RHEL 9. I think we've also got a satellite episode coming up. Also, Gunnar Hellickson, the VP of the RHEL BU, will also be on to talk about the future of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So, lot of amazing content coming up. Image Builder, some other things. So we're finally getting back to my episode plan that I had at the beginning of the year, but we're definitely looking forward to a great summer of Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. Go check out RHEL 9, the ISOs, the repositories, they're all there. Go check out CentOS Stream. Go sign up to attend the dojo. So lots of homework for all of you all. Thank you to everyone in the chat for hanging out with us. Also, thanks to Mark and Josh and a few, and definitely Carl. Again, Bitcoin in the mail. But with that being said, I forget what our next episode is. Actually, it may be. Oh, it is. Good grief, May's already half over. So our next episode will be RHEL 9. I was thinking there was one more before that, but yeah, tune in 2 weeks. RHEL 9. Until then. On behalf of Nate and our guest, Shaun, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.